Hello, YouTube sidekick here in my brand spanking new AJS 37 Viggen. This is the first video that we're doing about the Viggen, so I'm just going to take a little bit of time and talk a bit about the Viggen, because it really is a unique aircraft in D6. And the thing that you need to understand about the Viggen, to understand anything about the Viggen, is that it's Swedish. Yeah, that may sound funny, but in point of fact, just about everything about the Viggen is the way it is because it's Swedish, and that's because the Viggen was designed to integrate very tightly into Sweden's defense philosophy in the 1960s, and that philosophy was basically to make the Swedish berry bitter enough of a pill that the Soviet bear would not even think about making it into a meal. Essentially, living next door to the Soviets, the Swedes did not expect that if the Soviets decided to get violent, that they would be able to defeat them or even really repel them, but they did expect to make any conflict with Sweden so expensive for the Soviet Union that it just wouldn't be worth it. So the Viggen was designed to, for instance, operate aggressively in aggressively air defense denied area because the Swedes did not expect to have any chance of exercising any degree of suppression of enemy air defenses over the Soviets. It was expected that it would operate in limited numbers compared to the enemy air forces, so strikes had to be strategic and to be planned at the highest level. It had to be capable of reaching reasonably far behind front lines to hit strategic targets that were selected at a central level of planning. It had to be able to operate from improvised and dispersed bases and be maintained by personnel with relatively limited training. But given all of that, it still needed to be able to concentrate forces in space and time to have a strategically important effect. It wasn't designed to do close air support of troops in contact. It was basically designed to do battlefield air interdiction, or also deep interdiction. And it also had to be able to attack naval targets as well as land-based targets. And the Viggen was designed very specifically to operate this way, and kind of only this way, at least the ground attack version of the aircraft. There were other versions, but they're not covered in DCS. The AJ-37 was not, despite the fact that the Viggen had many roles, the AJ-37 was not in any way a multi-role aircraft. Nothing about it was sacrificed to make it more flexible at the expense of being fit for its very specific purpose. In other words, the Viggen was meant to be flown low, flown fast, but also flown precisely over reasonably long distances to very precise timetables. It was also designed to deliver a high-impact punch against high-value targets and then disappear into the boreal forest at high speed. So as we go through some of the Viggen functions, we'll take a look at just how fit for purpose the Viggen was. Now, one thing is certain, there is a lot to learn, and almost all of it is specific to the Viggen because, as I said, the Viggen was designed to do Viggen things well, and not to be compatible in any way with anybody else's doctrine or training or designs. Even takeoff and landing have their own Viggenish procedures, for heaven's sakes. But we're not going there today. Today we're going to talk about weapons employment. Now, the Viggen is capable of carrying a variety of unguided and guided weapons, although only in very specific loadouts. You can't flexibly combine, for instance, rockets and bombs. There's only certain ways you can load up the Viggen, and again, that's because of the way the interface is set out to do certain jobs very well and not to be able to mix and match. And today, we're going to look at a very specific loadout. Of course, we're going to look at dropping unguided, low-drag iron bombs because, it's what we do here. So we might as well get that out of the way before we take a look at anything else. Now, since the Viggen is really one of the first aircraft to implement what I would call a full precision delivery system, including a dynamic heads-up display, I thought it would be useful to do just a very brief detour and talk about how iron bombing went from the kind of open sights version that you get in the Second World War to the precision delivery method as embodied by the Viggen and then later on by later aircraft. And that's before things eventually transitioned all the way to precision-guided munitions, where the pilot is really not aiming the bomb anymore. This era of iron bombing basically started in the mid-1960s. The A4E bombing computer is the earliest version that I know of in the game. I mean, I guess you could argue that the F-86 has some elements of precision delivery system, but as we discussed, that was really more of the F-86 has more of a gun sight deflection computer than a true precision delivery system. The difference being that a true precision delivery system actually takes real-time inputs from the aircraft sensors and also from the target via radar, and provides dynamically updating cues to the pilot to help drop the ordnance more accurately. The F-86 just makes predictions based on what the pilot says he's going to do, and provides him a computed sight offset. Now, the problem, as we know around here, is that to release ordnance at exactly the right moment, when speed, altitude, and dive angle are all arranged that the bomb's trajectory will take it to the target, is not a simple thing to do. So, these kind of precision delivery systems were developed to help pilots do that. There's basically two flavors of precision delivery systems that were developed. The first is known as Continuous Computed Impact Point, CCIP, which basically leaves the timing of the drop in the pilot's hands, but which provides the pilot with a precise indication of where the bomb is expected to land at any given time. This has the advantage of simplicity in that it just is effectively an improved sight, which takes the guesswork out of where the bomb is going to land. Still, it depends on the pilot to time the release accurately. Now, this, as we all know, is easy when the aim mark is moving slowly over the ground. In other words, when you're diving steeply at the target or at relatively low speeds. But if you're coming at the target fast and at a flat dive angle, then timing the release can actually be pretty difficult. Now, Continuous Computed Release Point takes the opposite approach, and kind of in response to that problem. CCRP allows the pilot to designate the target, and then it leaves the onboard computer to determine when the release parameters are right to hit it. This has the advantage of removing the pilot's reaction time from the timing of the drop when, for instance, the release point is moving very quickly across the ground. This is actually the system that the A4 bombing computer uses. It has the disadvantage that the pilot has to continually to fly directly towards the target, because although the computer can correct for speed and altitude, essentially changes in pitch angle, it can't do anything about errors in alignment caused by changes in yaw. So if you don't fly over the target, you can't hit it. CCRP is often referred to as a level bombing technique, mostly because it doesn't require the pilot to actually see the target, so it can be used to do level bombing, but it doesn't actually need to be. When used in level bombing mode, it has a bit of a bad reputation because it can actually be quite difficult to steer the aircraft in level flight so that it passes directly over a target on the ground. A variety of steering cue systems have been developed, but all of them require a pretty significant amount of practice to use them effectively. So overall, especially among sim pilots, the CCIP system tends to have a bit of a better reputation. But I firmly believe that some of this is because CCRP systems just aren't used effectively, and because they take a little bit more time to learn how to do that. As evidence, I would point to the A4E, which has really a devastatingly effective bombing computer. I mean, when used properly, it is eminently possible to put bombs within 25 meters of a target from altitudes, 5,000 feet or more, which is about as good as any manually bombing method gets, at least in DCS, at least in my experience. So, with that background in mind, let's take a look at the slick bombing modes in the Viggen. So here we are in the cockpit. Now, there are two slick bombing modes for the Viggen. There is the dive bombing, or DYK mode, and there's another mode that is often referred to as level bombing mode. Sometimes it's called CCRP mode. I have news for you, though. Both of these modes are actually a form of CCRP, although it took me a while to figure that out. We'll talk a bit more about that when we get out to the range. First, I do want to add one small disclaimer here. I'm about to go out with the Viggen and do some very un-Viggenish things with it. I hope that will not offend the Viggen purists among you. I'll explain a little bit more when we're out at the range, but basically I'm not really trying to figure out how to use the Viggen as much as I am trying to figure out how the Viggen does what it does, because I found that that's not always easy to figure out from the material that's out there. But like I said, we'll talk about that more out at the range. Let's just get things set up right now. We're going to start in dive bombing mode. So there's two settings that we need to worry about. They're on the right-hand side of the cockpit. The first dial is the weapon selector dial. We need to set that to DYK. And we need to set the sight interval to 10, which means that the bombs will drop with the minimum interval in between them. So having set those things, the one other thing that we need to do in the cockpit, which you always need to do in the Viggen, is to set the QFE altitude, which is basically just a way of saying what the barometric pressure at ground level at the target is. And this means that your altimeter essentially will know the height above the target, which is important for the bombing computer to get accurate results. So it's always important to set the QFE. You get it from your knee board on the target waypoint, and you just set it on below the altimeter here. And with that, we're ready to press on and go out to the range. Now, one thing that I will say, again, the videos that I'm going to make here, I think, I'm not going to focus a lot on the detailed steps that need to be taken. There is a lot of excellent documentation, particularly Chuck's guide out there. I would certainly encourage you to download it and go through it. It will do a much better job of explaining exactly the steps you have to go through than I will ever do in any of these videos. So we're just about ready to get started out to the runway here. But it does bring up a topic that I want to talk a little bit about. I've been thinking exactly how I want to approach these videos. Wasn't sure, one style of video is to do these as if they're a tutorial for a complete new... to do them as a tutorial as if, for brand new players to the Viggen and go step by step through everything. I didn't really want to do that because, as I said, there are a few videos out there that do that. But by the same token, I'm new to the Viggen myself, and I can't really claim to be an expert in using it tactically or operationally. So basically, these videos are going to be about a little bit about me learning about how the Viggen works and musing on what that means. And trying to sort out how to use the various systems. And there are lots of systems in the Viggen, and they all interlock to some extent between the radar and the nav system, even the engine controls, all of the weapons controls. The Viggen is a very tightly designed and integrated package, so you kind of got to learn everything to learn anything. Okay, well, he's walking at us because we're leaving from the wrong end of the runway. Okay, good to know. All right, so as I said, what I'm going to do is try and figure out the Viggen myself. I'm going to try and tell you the things that I have learned in the Viggen. If you are an expert Viggen flyer, please feel free to contribute constructive comments to the videos. And if you're new to the Viggen and you have questions, feel free to ask them in the comments or drop by my Discord and let's have a discussion about them. So, as I said, we're taking off here out of Kobuleti. And, there is even symbology on the Viggen HUD for takeoff. You can see the line at the very bottom of the HUD. Once it extends all the way to the edges down there, it's time to take off. And then we do that. We already have HUD symbology for what our climb-out angle should look like while we're raising the gear. Basically, there's a lot of things that the Viggen is going to try and tell you if you know where to look. I haven't even learned them all, but that's going to be one of the really interesting experiences of flying the Viggen. Now, today's practice, as I said, is going to be very un-Viggenish. I am not going to fly low and fast and try to do tactical pop-up attacks. Instead, I'm going to do reasonably standard range runs on my iron bombing test range, as I call it. If you have frequented my channel, you know it very well. If you haven't, then you may want to go back and look at some of the previous videos that I've done. I'm going to look at the Viggen in the context of the other iron bombing airplanes that I know and try to figure out how it does what it does and how that compares to the way other aircraft work. So you'll have to bear with me. As I said, this won't look like flying the Viggen in a tactical scenario, but I think it will be very instructive in trying to figure out exactly what the computer is doing in the Viggen, and that's not always an easy thing to figure out. And the videos that I've found, at least, have not been very helpful in doing that because they tend to be pretty procedural. They go through the steps that are in the manual, the steps that are in Chuck's guides, and they show you how to do them in the cockpit, but they don't really tell you why you're doing them, and more to the point, they don't tell you what effect they have on the accuracy you're going to obtain, which is really what I'm interested in doing, and it's what I basically do out here on the test range. It's why we have instrumented the test range with the target information tracking system. So we're going to go do some iron bombing with the Viggen. Alright, so first thing I'm doing, which you won't normally say when you're flying the Viggen, is I'm climbing a little. I actually want to take an actual dive bombing run at the target this time. So we want to climb up to a couple of thousand meters. Now, my one concession to the Viggen is I'm not going to get in quite so close or dive so steeply at the target as I would in most other iron bombers, because, you know, the Viggen really isn't a dive bomber. But I do want to start from a high enough altitude that we are actually doing this as a proper dive run, and I'm doing it like I do it in other iron bomber speeds. I just want to make the point that the Viggen is not actually doing anything magical or different than those systems do. Some of it is hidden a little bit behind the inside the black box, so it's not always easy to figure out. But trust me, I believe it's actually doing something very similar, for instance, to what other systems do. At any rate, so there's really a couple of stages that we're going to go through in dropping the bombs. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to switch our master mode to ANF, which is basically the attack mode. We're going to get a new HUD symbology when we do that. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to remove the trigger safety. We're going to make the trigger unsafe. I have actually bound that to the first detent on my my Warthog joystick. As soon as I start doing that, the radar is going to start measuring the distance to the target. At that point, I can actually depress the trigger all the way, which I'll do. The bombs will not drop. What will happen is that the pipper in the center of the screen, the computer will use that as the target designation point. And when the computer flies to the point where the bomb release should happen to hit the designated point, it's going to release the bombs. So you can see I am now unsafing, and I'm holding the trigger, and then the bombs have gone. So let's take a look at how we did. So this is one thing that I see a lot of people in videos saying. They imply that you have to come on the trigger at that point when the little wings on the targeting symbol appear, but that's actually not true. You can actually depress the trigger anytime you want to. Just going to change the reporting structure of target information tracking system here so we can see every bomb, because it's important. So let's just take a look here at what we've got. I'm pausing for a sec. You'll notice that it's not bad, but actually all of that drop was long. And that's even though it looked to me like my target designation was pretty good. Certainly it wasn't quite as long as all the bombs were. And so I think that what is happening here, and not just based on this drop, but based on all the practicing that I have done, is that you have to be very careful to be very quiet on your control inputs once you have designated that target. If you push or pull on the stick, especially at the last minute as you're going over the target, that is what is going to cause your bombs to drop inaccurately. So the trick in using dive bombing mode in the Viggen is to pick up the target, to begin designating the point where you want it to drop. You don't even actually have to hold it steady, except for those last half second or so, just before the bombs drop. You have to have the reticle over the target. You have to be flying very quietly, and then you will have an accurate drop. So this time we're going to go around again. We're going to try the white building this time as the target. I'm going to try very hard to be very sort of orderly and systematic, to come on the trigger, and then even though I'm going to let the target reticle move up to the target, I'm going to stop it just as it gets to the target at just about the time when I'm going to be releasing, and that should be the secret to giving us a very accurate drop. So just a standard roll-in lift vector to target. We're going to pull up the symbology in the Viggen, and the way the Viggen rolls out, by the way, makes it very easy to roll in very accurately. Maybe the easiest of any of the aircraft I've actually flown. So now you can see the reticle is well below the target. So we're letting it drift up to the target, as you do. Now we're unsafe. Now we're holding the trigger, and I'm just trying to keep the reticle on the target. I'm having to put a little bit of pressure forward on the stick. Try not to make that too much, though. Especially not right at the end. Ooh, that looks like a good drop. Let's see what the target information tracking system has to say. While we're waiting for that, we'll just go around again. This time we'll pick up one of the round targets on the far right-hand side of the target area, I think. Certainly is easy to get back up to altitude with all of that thrust in the Viggen. Okay, how'd we do? That's a pretty good drop. I think we actually bracketed the target. Pretty close. If anything, we were a little short, which doesn't surprise me because it did feel like I was pushing a little on the stick at the last minute to keep the pipper on the target. And I really do think that is the biggest determiner of accuracy. I should also point out that there's a little bit of an issue with the Viggen in that quantity can often make up for quality in the Viggen, because you can't drop bombs 1 or 2 at a time. You have to drop all 16 of them or all 8 of them at the same time. And that means that you can have a pattern that actually covers the target that might not have actually been that accurate. And, you know, what I'm trying to do is, I think I said in my video on the F-86, I'd like to be able to hit the target within 25 meters 4 times out of 5. And so I think it's really important to actually do this with the target information tracking script recording every bomb. So you can actually take a look at how accurate the whole drop was rather than deciding whether or not you actually clobbered the target, because frankly that's not that hard to do with this many bombs. Okay, so once again we're rolling in, standard roll in. This one's maybe a little bit lower angle than the other two were, and that's fine because the Viggen is not meant to dive steeply. Although of course it makes it easier if you do to some extent. Okay, now we're going to get the pipper up to the target. Unsafe. Triggers on. Wait, gone. And away we go. Yeah, that looks pretty good too. So, in a sense, I would say that part of the reason why the Viggen was designed with a CCRP mode, even in dive bombing, rather than a CCIP mode, is partly this point, that the Viggen was designed to drop bombs while moving fast at shallow dive angles, which is exactly the situation. Yeah, that was a good drop. But that's exactly the situation where it's difficult for the pilot to judge the release timing. And so the Viggen was designed to take that away from the pilot. Instead, the pilot's job, even in dive bombing mode, is to fly very accurately at the target and let the computer figure out when to drop the bombs. But it's a CCRP mode. I'm convinced of that. What it's using as target designation is whatever you happen to put the pipper on. So it doesn't feel like a usual CCRP mode because you're not pre-designating the target and then flying towards it. You're continuously designated by the way you fly. Anyways, that's what I think of dive bombing mode. Let's go take a look at the other slick bombing mode, which, as I said, is sometimes referred to level bombing, sometimes referred to as CCRP, maybe referred to as plan bombing, because that's the weapon selector switch setting that you use, which I have set here, but I didn't show you. So our weapon selector is set to plan. Our interval is also set to 10. QFE is set up again properly. And this time we're going to use the other bombing mode. So in this bombing mode, this CCRP bombing mode is a more traditional CCRP bombing mode. What we're going to do is that we are going to put the reticle over the target, and then we are going to designate it by putting the trigger, by lifting the trigger safety catch. It's a great example of how the Viggen makes multiple uses of the same switches to do different things. In the last mode, raising the trigger safety just turned the radar on. In this mode, it actually designates the target. Now, once the target is designated, we can depress the trigger and fly the aircraft, and when we fly over the release point, then the plane is going to drop the bombs, which is very similar, if you think about it, to how the A4 bombing computer works. In that case, you designate the target by actually depressing the trigger all the way. Here we do it in 2 stages. So the trick is that we do not have to fly level, actually. We just have to fly at the target. Now, we will get a steering cue. That steering cue will include a pitch cue, and what I have discovered is we don't really need to follow the pitch cue. We just need to follow the yaw cue. I'll show you what I mean here as we go through this. So I'm getting the reticle up to the target, designating the target with the safety. My trigger is on. I'm just trying to fly in a straight line. All I'm trying to do is fly over the target. And see how we did. And as you can see, that was a pretty fair drop. Now, we were off a little bit in line, and that's the issue with this kind of targeting mode. It's an issue with the A4, for instance. Most of the time when I miss when the A4, I miss for line. Same thing here. In fact, this bombing run field felt a lot to me like the A4 because I have the trigger safe set to the first detent. I basically just got the pip around the target, squeezed the trigger, same as I do in the A4. Just messing about with target information tracking script here so we can see the actual individual bombs. And there you can see basically we got them at 7, 9, and 11 o'clock around, you know, all within about 25 meters. So pretty good drop. So as I was saying, it felt to me an awful lot like the way I drop bombs in the A4, get the reticle over the target, and then just squeeze the trigger. And then the trick is after that is to fly, basically fly in a straight line. Don't be very active on the stick, and let the computer do its job. You don't have to pull up and fly level. That's the trick. That's the key here. Now, the system is designed to be used when flying reasonably level. I'm not saying it doesn't work when you do that. I'm saying that the principle it's using does not rely on you flying level. It's essentially a CCRP mode. You designate the target by unsafing the trigger, and then the trick is that you have to fly accurately enough after that to make sure you go over the target so the computer can release the bombs at the right time. So we're going to do the white building again here. Same thing. We're just going to, so as you can see, we're far from level at this point, but we are going to make this work. We're going to let the pipper come up, and then we're going to click the first trigger detent, hold the trigger down. I'm just trying to fly straight. Now you can see that the steering cue was asking me, for instance, to dive there, but if I do that, then I end up messing up the drop in my experience. I don't really need to worry about the pitch steering cue. I need to worry about the yaw steering cue. As you can see, that one looked pretty good as well. We certainly took out the building. We'll have to see what target information tracking system says about the actual quantitative accuracy of our drop here. Oh, not bad. We only got the grouping there. I'll have to go to the menu here and get the individual impacts. As you can see, we dropped a little bit short. Which I think is fair because I think I was designating a little bit in front of the building. The actual center of the target's in the middle of the building, so it's actually a little bit hard to designate that as a target. If you designate the top of the building, you're actually effectively designating the ground behind it, if you know what I mean. So again, I don't think that was a bad result. And again, although this is referred to as the level bombing technique, we were in no way bombing on the level. As I said, I really think of this as a very standard CCRP mode, very similar, like I said, to the A4 bombing computer. The only difference here is that you actually have a two-stage designation, but again, like I said, if you bind it to your trigger the way I have, there's really no difference at all. Okay, once again, we're just bringing the pipper up to the target. When we get it to the middle of the target, we pickle and hold. And again, just fly through the little release point, nice and smooth. And bombs on target. We'll wait for the target information tracking script to tell us how we did. While we're doing that, let's set up for one more run on the range. Let's actually go kill something this time. We'll go look at the M113 targets that are just to the right over there. Well, that's a pretty nice result. At least the center of the bombs, just barely a little bit more than 10 meters. A little bit, again, a little bit off to the right, a little bit long. Pretty good result, though. So we're going to go one more run. We'll take a look at those M113s. They're a little bit farther over to the right. Maybe we'll drop down and make this feel a little bit more like a Viggen run. Nice flat bombing run, which is what the Viggen is really designed to do. So the reticle, the steering cue will look a little bit more like what you're used to seeing if you fly the Viggen. So, anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I know it's not standard Viggen fare. I learned an awful lot making this video, though. I'm a lot more comfortable understanding what the Viggen is doing and how to get what I think are pretty consistent results now, and how to choose between the dive bombing mode and the so-called level bombing mode. It was very instructive, so I'm really looking forward to doing some more with the Viggen. I'm hoping that you're going to continue to join me on that journey. All right, here we come. up to the target. You can just see the little cluster of M113s. Get ourselves lined up. Once again, we're just going to wait till we're on the target. Designate and hold. And the bombs are already gone. Viggen certainly drops the bombs from a long distance away. Look at that, we got 3 M113s. Hard to call that a bad drop. Alright, well that's going to do it for today. It's already a bit of a long video. Like and subscribe as usual. Come on to the Discord channel if you want to discuss any of this stuff. I think there's some interesting things to talk about. For now, this is going to be Sidekick, signing off.